When Trump was elected, a LGBTI community group had a gay disco outside Mike Pence's house, right? Yeah, that sort of stuff is like really cool because it also produces content that you can then push to your supporters, right?
Next up is the fun bit, the actual tactics, the actions you're going to take. You're going to do a great big mess of these things and brainstorm it, but you'll end up, hopefully, with some really clear tactics you can do, who's responsible for making them happen, and what people in your allies and supporters are actually involved in getting it done. We'll also look at a timeline of events where it might be opportune to take these actions.
So this is about identifying the how of what you're going to get your supporters to do to create the change or put pressure on your decision makers to create the change. It's where you can be the most creative. As your team, sit down, get a whiteboard, a large piece of paper, and think about all the exciting things that you can do. Create a petition, have a town hall event with your local MP, have a protest, have a bake sale. Have a disco, have a dance party. What are all the things that you could do to help bring attention to your campaign? Try to aim for 10 to 15 tactics. You definitely want more because you're not going to be able to deliver them all because we're all resource constrained. And so within the capacity of your team and the resources that you have at your disposal, what do you think you can actually deliver? And in the next, X amount of time that you have to get your campaign running. So I would think about the lowest barrier to entry tactics. So protests, probably a little bit too complicated. I would start with getting likes on my photo, getting people to share my content on our new Facebook page that we've started for the group.
A nice way to understand actions is to plot them on a commitment curve that shows how hard it is for somebody to get involved. People might view a campaign on Facebook. It's really easy to do, right? The next step might be to like that campaign on social media. Next might be joining in, so signing an online petition or joining a mailing list. These are all low barrier actions. Next, we have medium barrier actions. For example, sharing something with my community is an action you have to deliberately take. Creating content, or even purchasing a product or donating money can still be done at home, but it's a bit harder to do than just like or look at an article online. And finally, high barrier actions are things like attending an event or even convening an event.
Where you need to take people through a journey to get them to attend your event, right? And so you have to start with introducing them to your content. That's about getting them to like your page. Then it's about getting them to share your page. Then it's about getting them to donate to your page or your group. And then it's about getting them to attend the event. And that's just one example of some of the supporter journey you can take people on. But what are the tactics that can help people, bring people into your campaign, engage them in your campaign, and get them to start coming to the protest or event that you want to hold? If you're at the end point of a campaign where you think the only option that you have is now to go to be radical and protest at the decision maker's house or something like that, then yeah, absolutely, it's something that you should consider. Obviously, there's a whole range of stuff that you need to think around that, around security, legals, all that sort of stuff. If you look at the Women's March, that was massive logistics to organize something like that. And the theory of change of that was this is a solidarity action to send a message to Washington to say that we stand for equality, across all genders and race, etc. And I think that is incredibly powerful because we know that it annoyed Trump, right? And it just dug at him. In terms of this campaign, when thinking about building a school, that is very much at the core of you probably don't want to move to protest straight away. You want to think about you want to engage the influences in the school. It's kind of not a political issue. Most sides of politics are going to agree with building a school. Right? Sometimes it's the best thing to do to get a lot of media attention around it. Yeah. Sometimes it's not the best thing to do. Maybe you need to have a conversation with them first before you go and do something kind of radical. Greenpeace are the best at it. They work with some of the best artists in the world. People made a massive polar bear and walked it to Shell's office. And that brought a huge amount of media attention to their cause and helped build pressure through the media. And that was like their theory of change of that campaign action, is that we need to get more media on this. So let's build a massive polar bear, work with some of the best artists, and then walk that polar bear through the streets of London to the Shell head office. It's a very creative exercise. Putting together, planning, and then executing a stunt. Like, there's a whole range of things you need to think about before just like doing a stunt. When you're going through your allies and opponents, if there is a famous artist in your area, could they build the artwork behind your campaign? More and more now, campaigners are thinking about the role of art in our campaigns. Doing a scan of the people that can support your campaign, finding out what their talents are, and seeing how they can integrate into your campaign. So it's like with the tactics, it links to a timeline, right? So what are the opportunities for the campaign in the coming months? Look for the best opportunity for you to win the campaign. So for example, is there an election coming up? Is there a local council election coming up? Is there a federal election coming up? Is there a state election coming up? How does that play into this narrative? Because politicians are keen to listen around elections. From now to then, what are the things that we can do to put pressure on that decision maker, so when they make that decision, they've been hit so many times up until that point that they know that, like, if they do not make this funding request, there is going to be a lot of people in that community that won't be voting for them next election. One really good example around the school that I've seen actually happen is before the election, they invited all the political candidates, a Build a School group, invited all the political candidates to an event and said, who's going to endorse building a new school in front of 300 people from the local community, and basically made them all endorse that. And so when the person was elected, they went into government and were like, well, you've committed to that. You committed to there, here you are on film, build the school, right? So that was a really powerful way of being able to do that.
If you've done this right, from your big mess of ideas, you've figured out some really easy actions that have a low barrier to entry, and you've got them listed with who's accountable and when they're going to get done. The timeline tells us some interesting events where we can actually take action.
Things take time as well, right? Like, things aren't going to happen overnight. You can plan for moments in your campaign, but you need to be ready for the long haul, in many cases. And so we basically don't want to get stuck planning every moment of our lives in the campaign. The timeline, I would plan for like the first 6 months and figure out what's happening in the next 6 months that will help us push our momentum behind our campaign, and then 3 months in, plan for the next 6 months as you learn more about your campaign. I think this is an exciting thing because it allows you to understand how you're actually going to create change and what the role of the public or your supporters are in helping you bring around that change.
Now you've figured out your tactics, we get to bubble them up to the strategy at the top of the template and get that kind of theory of change, this to this to this to this thing done.
So this is an internal thing that then you will make external in a sexy way, right? It's about creating a clear understanding of what people's role is in this campaign and how it will help bring change. All your tactics are never going to work. And it's about testing and seeing which tactic is going to have the most impact, for example, and then refining that tactic and doing it better the next time and doing it better again and just going as hard as you can on that issue.